Hello, you're watching TVP World News. I'm Jonasz Rewiński. As crunch meetings are fixed for Moscow and Kyiv next week in the push for peace in Ukraine, new information has emerged regarding Donald Trump's special envoy, Steve Witkoff. According to reports, the US official held a call with top Kremlin aide in which he suggested he could encourage the US president to accept a more Moscow-friendly deal.
How are you, Mr. President?
Special Envoy Steve Witkoff is due to return to Moscow next week, spearheading Donald Trump's push for peace in Ukraine. And it's Witkoff's contacts with the Kremlin that have put the US president's point man in the spotlight. Witkoff apparently told a top foreign policy aide to Vladimir Putin, Yuri Ushakov, that he could pressure Ukraine and Trump into accepting a Moscow-friendly peace deal, according to a transcript of a phone call published by Bloomberg.
Now, me to you, I know what it's going to take to get a peace deal done. Donetsk and maybe a land swap somewhere. But I'm saying, instead of talking like that, let's talk more hopefully, because I think we're going to get a deal here. And I think, Yuri, the president will give me a lot of space and discretion to get to the deal.
The news agency reports Witkoff's guidance in mid-October involved suggesting a Trump-Putin call before Volodymyr Zelensky visited the White House. The Russian and US presidents subsequently spoke for 2 hours.
With your help, we can stop this war.
Zelensky flew to Washington looking to secure long-range US Tomahawk missiles, but left empty-handed. Witkoff also apparently coached Ushakov on how Putin could best approach Trump, suggesting he praised the American leader for the Gaza peace deal. Former US diplomats say fueling Russia's stance on its maximalist demands means Putin will not yield, setting peace talks on a path to failure.
Vladimir Putin is not going to want any kind of credible security guarantee that stops the fighting sufficiently to allow Ukraine to proceed with European integration and to create an independent, sovereign, democratic state integrated into the European Union.
Foreign policy expert and former US Defense Department official Ian Brzezinski says a just peace can only be achieved if Vladimir Putin feels that his regime is threatened.
Putin requires 2 things to cause him to change course. One, he has to see his territorial gains, these illegal territorial gains, to be put at risk. And then 2, he has to see his own regime being put at risk. The West has the capacity to do that. It just has to act.
Donald Trump has dismissed the leak, calling Witkoff's actions standard practice. This comes after a night of intense Russian airstrikes in Zaporizhia. The UN High Commissioner for Human Rights says well over 14,000 civilians have been killed since Moscow launched its full-scale invasion. John Todd for TVP World.
Latest reports suggest the Ukraine peace plan continues to evolve, with improvements to the controversial initial draft leaked earlier this week. TVP World spoke to former US Ambassador to Poland, Daniel Fried, and former US Special Representative for Ukraine negotiations, Kurt Volker, about the negotiation process and the issues surrounding Steve Witkoff's earlier talks with the Russians, as well as how these developments may impact the ongoing talks going forward.
There is a mini furor in Washington today about the transcripts of 2 conversations, Steve Witkoff's with Yuri Ushakov and Yuri Ushakov with Kirill Dmitriev. What that shows, what those transcripts show, is that Steve Witkoff was trying to jolly the Russians, encourage them to negotiate, and then the Russians decided to use Witkoff to jam through their own proposal. There was not so much wrong with Steve Witkoff trying to work a channel with the Russians. There was everything wrong with Steve Witkoff not examining the proposal point by point. He should have known that it was internally inconsistent and inconsistent indeed with President Trump's stated objectives. So that was a problem. But as Kurt Volker said, Marco Rubio cleaned it up on Sunday in Geneva in a remarkable show of leadership and discipline. So that damage has been largely undone. There's a better plan. I haven't seen it, but the Ukrainians regard it as better. I'm prepared to believe them. There's a better plan on the table, and the problem will quickly arise that the Russians have no interest in serious negotiations. And then the test will be, are the Europeans and Americans prepared to push against Russia? Because that's the way you get a deal.
Witkoff seems to view Russia as a partner. Russia is the aggressor. They're killing, they're bombing civilians deliberately. They're abducting children. It is really an awful situation. And he's viewing the United States as Russia's partner, and Ukraine as an object to be divvied up or just discussed and decided about in some way. Ukraine, of course, is a real place with real people, with real interests, and they are fighting to defend themselves against that Russian aggression. So rather than the fact of the phone calls and that kind of diplomatic exchange, what bothers me about it is the content, where he is aligning the United States with Russia.
Latest reports say the European Union is urgently seeking an emergency bridging loan to help Kyiv withstand the ongoing Russian invasion. This comes as Belgium's Euroclear, the financial group which holds most of Russia's frozen assets, has reiterated its opposition to any efforts to use Moscow's funds to bolster Ukraine's economy, citing fears of retaliation and possible damage to Europe's standing on the financial markets, according to the Financial Times. The European Union froze some 210 billion euros worth of Russian state assets following Moscow's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, and 185 billion euros of that sum is being held at Belgium-based Euroclear. In a letter to EU officials, the organization warned that using the assets to aid Kyiv risks diminishing investment potential in Europe. Euroclear's chief executive also warned that investors and the Kremlin would view the move as confiscation, undermining the rule of law and risking Russian retaliation. The company also requested unconditional guarantees to help manage the risks. The sentiment was echoed by Belgian Prime Minister, who is concerned about legal and financial repercussions for his country. The European Commission is yet to release technical details of its plan to use the frozen assets. Poland is beefing up its defences in the Baltic Sea, choosing Sweden to supply 3 submarines in a multi-billion-dollar deal. The country's navy has been waiting for the decision for more than a decade, and the first new vessels are not expected to arrive before 2030. Our defence correspondent Zuzanna Jurek has more.
It is now official. Sweden will deliver 3 new submarines to the Polish Navy as part of Warsaw's highly anticipated Orca, or the killer whale program.
We are building a new security architecture, and this decision establishes a new security architecture in the Baltic Sea.
Combining stealth, endurance.
Poland's newest purchase is said to be Saab's A-26 Blacking-class submarine. Difficult to detect, adapted for multi-domain operations, and able to operate in shallow waters. These vessels are capable of a suite of operations, including offense, defense, and intelligence gathering. Polish Navy officers, who have been waiting for a decision on the Orca program for multiple decades, stress the technological superiority of the new equipment.
A-26, a state-of-the-art vessel designed to meet the challenges of the Navy in the wartime theater of operations. Stealth, the latest combat systems, and the weaponry we have been waiting for. And above all, tailor-made for the tasks we usually perform in the Baltic Sea and adjacent areas, for example, those that are in the interests of our country. Equipped with an air-independent propulsion system, which in seas such as the Baltic Sea offers similar capabilities to nuclear propulsion in the ocean.
Timelines, however, remain an obstacle, with conventional submarine construction lasting 5 to 10 years. Poland is looking to bridge this naval capability gap sooner rather than later, with Stockholm providing Warsaw with a training craft.
We want our sailors to learn how to operate on a newer vessel than the one we have, so the stopgap will be able to fill the void in between the signing of the agreement and the delivery to the Polish Navy. Exercises will begin in Sweden next year, and in 2027, the stopgap vessel will already be serving our sailors.
This purchase agreement comes as Stockholm and Warsaw seek to jointly strengthen the security of the Baltic Sea.
The relationship between Sweden and Poland is fundamentally transformed since we're no longer partners, we're true allies. That has created great potential for us to deepening our bilateral cooperation.
A partnership which is strategically vital, with both countries on the front line of Russia's continuous threats to the Baltic, from GPS jamming to assaults on critical infrastructure and undersea cables, as well as the ever-present shadow fleet of oil tankers.
The key thing about the submarines is that they bring the element of unpredictability to the predator's assumptions. Predator can, and in this case obviously that's Russia, cannot really fully be aware of where the submarines are and what kind of the area they may come out and change the strategic dynamic.
And Poland, which is now set to receive 44 billion euros from the EU's Security Action for Europe or SAFE Loans programme, the largest sum for any individual member state, is well poised to continue its rearmaments mission. For TVP World, Zuzanna Jurek.
The European Parliament has become a venue for the intense debate on Russia's hybrid warfare, with the recent railway sabotage operation in Poland at the top of the agenda. According to Polish officials, the attempted derailment of a passenger train was an act of unprecedented escalation, and the European Union cannot remain silent.
In recent weeks, the airspace has been violated over Belgium, over the Netherlands, Poland, Romania, Denmark, Estonia, Germany, Lithuania, Latvia, and again Romania yesterday. These incidents are a pattern, not an accident. These incidents are elements of a hybrid warfare, a deliberate grey zone campaign targeting Europe.
We need specific tools to detect and eliminate pro-Russian propaganda, including digital platforms. We need even more European police cooperation.
Poland, as well as other countries, has the right and obligation to protect its borders and its infrastructure. We expect real, investigative and coordinated cooperation in the field of response to hybrid threats.
We have to admit that we live in a time when the gap between the law and war is narrowing. We can call it a hybrid war, a provocation, but it has been going on for a few years. Belgium is only starting to think what to do with the Russian reserves, and the drones are flying over Brussels.
Thousands took to the streets of the Bulgarian capital Sofia on Wednesday, ahead of the final parliamentary vote on a controversial new budget plan. Protesters fear the budget's impact on individuals and businesses, including an increase in social security contributions. The protesters demonstrated against newly proposed steep taxes as Bulgarian MPs prepare for the final vote on the 2026 budget draft. Two Bulgarian opposition parties, We Continued the Change and Democratic Bulgaria, organized a rally that gathered some 20,000 protesters. Tensions escalated and police clashed with the demonstrators. Some of the protesters attempted to break through the police cordon deployed in front of the National Assembly building, while others tried to overturn a police van. Some of those gathered at the rally complained of tear gas being used against them by the police. The Bulgarian Interior Ministry reported 3 police officers were injured in the line of duty. Pope Leo is set to make his international debut on a 6-day trip to Turkey and Lebanon. The mission carries a theme of peace and unity. The Vatican expects the trip to be demanding, as it will be packed with meetings with religious and political leaders. Turkey, home to some 36,000 Christians, will be Leo's first stop, where he will meet with the country's President Recep Tayyip Erdogan. The Pope's arrival in Lebanon is also highly anticipated, as tensions in the region remain high, especially between Israel and Hezbollah. With the first international trip, the destinations are strategic for the head of the Catholic Church to spread his message, calling for peace in the Middle East and Ukraine. And that's all for now. Thank you for watching, and please stay with us here on TVP World.